Imagine you meet a nice guy from middle America. He's an Iraq and Afghanistan combat war veteran who's just returned home. You both love 90s rap and voted for Obama. It's not long before he joins the KKK. You didn't expect that, did you? Well, my next guest spent 3 years as a radicalized Imperial Nighthawk in the Georgia White Knights. Today's part one of his story, where he'll share how he went from serving shoulder to shoulder with people of all races in the Army to hunting them down and physically assaulting them, and how his wife's successful intervention led not only to his reformation, but also to him creating a de-radicalization program designed specifically with veterans in mind. Former neo-Nazi, from extreme hate to spreading love, from white pride to proud dad, Chris Buckley. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you said early on that you felt like you were groomed for extremism. I've never heard anyone say that before. Can you explain what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so like grooming, when we think of the word grooming, we think of like sex trafficking and things like that, where you start with your victims and you start to desensitize them. Well, that's been going on my whole life. I was molested as a kid by a very close family member, and that grooming process was very long and drawn out. I mean, from the time I was old enough to walk until the molestation started, the grooming was taking place. My parents were very racist behind closed doors, most of my father, but my mother didn't really provide objective, ideology to it. So I would hear this a lot. The racist ideology. And I grew up in Cleveland in the mid 90s when there was this big busing integration act where they were taking 15 or 20 kids from the west side of Cleveland and they bust them to the east side, 180 blocks into the east side to a mostly black school. And they did the same thing to 15 or 20 black kids and bust them over to the white side of town. And I never really understood why the city was so segregated the way it was, but all of these little things that happen throughout your life are grooming you into an extremist ideology, from confirmation bias to the stuff that my dad would tell me at home, the shit that he would say about, your mom can't get government assistance because it's loaded up with blacks on the welfare system, blah, blah, blah. And, the ideology around it, they were horrible people, violent, uncivilized, savages, blah, blah, blah. And then I go to this school at 10 years old and was physically assaulted, urinated on, my shoes were stolen, and my teeth were through my lip on the very first day of school. So that was an opening, yep, Dad was right, of idea for me. I joined the Army, and I'm not saying that everybody that joins the military is extremist, but there's a very extreme ideology around the military. I mean, just taking from when we joined the war in Afghanistan, where we got involved in Iraq, and just the way that the military culture changed from that old school Vietnam style jungle warfare training scenarios to desert warfare training, the way that every single target that wasn't one of our green pop-up targets in our lane was a big poster of a traditional Muslim aged male of military age, pointing an AK-47 at you or an RPG, suicide vest, men and women both, children with suicide vest. And there was never that target to check your focus and be like, hey, would you like a bottle of water? And be like, oh, I don't shoot that when I go to this one. So it was that visual desensitization, the training scenarios that we went through. There was they were always bad guys. There was never a good guy that was hey, they're going to blow you up. Go this way. They were all just, everybody was against you. So with the lack of uniforms and just there was so much that went into creating this fear, as well as this disdain for the Muslim community as a whole, in my opinion, just experiencing Islam through such a very narrow lens was extreme in itself.
And another part of the extremism model that you describe is what you call a cognitive opening. And you experienced that while you were serving. Can you tell us about what a cognitive opening is and how you believe you experienced that?
So cognitive opening is it's a situation or a trauma scenario that happens, and it can be a compound trauma or a a continuous trauma, that it opens the person's ideology up to extremism. So my cognitive opening was when my best friend Daniel Wallace was in action on a route on a routine mission where we were taking supplies to another base so that they could do medical services for local nationals in the area. And he was killed because he wanted to get IV bags and antibiotics and medicine to this other base that we were resupplying so that they could help the local community. I remember that was the very time in my life that I ever experienced a hatred towards an entire group of people the way that I did the hatred I experienced towards the homosexual community because of the molestation. So I think that was the shift. That was the opening in my life, that trauma opened me up to anger and just the will and the want to do violence to a certain demographic.
So you said he was killed because he was trying to get supplies to another area. What do you mean he was?
So when you're in the military, you have resupply missions. Sometimes the base that you're trying to resupply with ammunition, radio equipment, sensitive items that, like, if fell into the wrong hands, could create a very serious problem for U.S. soldiers. Night vision goggles and medical supplies, so that base could open and run its clinic that helped the local nationals around that base receive medical care and attention. The base that we were resupplying was too small for an airstrip, so we couldn't use like a cargo plane or helicopters, things of that, because it was just too much equipment for that base. So we had to drive it in. And that's the way we did it all the time, is we would just drive the equipment from our base to the base that was about a day south of us.
So were you in the vehicle together? What happened?
Yeah, so we were driving down Route Jeep, Oregon Valley from Oregon E to Sharana, and we were told to stop and check the load because we used a big flatbed trailer. It's called like a 916 trailer. It's got a big gooseneck on it that like hooks to the truck. And the binders and the cargo nets on there were rocking real bad. And we were getting ready to go through a wadi, which is a dried up riverbed. And they come over and they said, hey, this load's shifting real bad. Get out and see if you can't tighten these binders down a little more, because if this load spills, we're going to be here for a few days. We have no close air support. We have no, QRF, quick reaction force. So it's just us. We get into a tussle in the bottom because I smoke cigarettes and I'm on a lot of ammunition. So I can't really smoke in the vehicle. He chewed tobacco, so he had his nicotine fix. We both had to urinate. There was plenty of Gatorade bottles. So I felt like I should win by fucking default because I needed to light a cigarette. Everything else was equal across the board, right? So we get to goofing off, moving around, and the back of the door on the MRAP pops open, and he beats me out the back of the door, and never stood back up. I leaned out. I thought he fell, and I leaned out to laugh at him, and I noticed that he had a bullet hole above his left eye, and like instant swelling. The back of the head was like splattered. It actually had gotten on me because I was so close. Remember, I didn't think about it. I just jumped out. I started to try to pack a wound, and it was kind of like put a vase back together in a pillowcase that had been broken. I didn't really So like it was my first experience with post-mortem reflexes. I noticed that the eye that wasn't completely swelled shut was kind of looking and traveling around, and like, and I remembered like he was trying to yawn. It looked like he was trying to yawn. His mouth was moving, and there was just a lot of activity in his body that like just didn't register. Like he's gone. Um, and I just like that moment. Like I didn't understand why he was targeted, why he was killed, why he didn't want to allow the medical supplies and the other supplies that we were taking to that base that was going to benefit the people in the region. And I just got angry, and I really started to drink heavily. I was having alcohol mailed to me in water bottles, so like a case of these water bottles would be each one dumped out
Oh, wow.
and refilled with rum, vodka, whatever we could get our hands on. If we used Coca-Cola or Pepsi bottles, then we would use dark liquors like bourbon or whiskey.
Hmm.
Mouthwash bottles we would have filled with vodka or rum and a couple of drops of food coloring added to it to make it look like mouthwash. I mean, I had an entire bar in my little room where I stayed at.
Wow. And so that sounds like it's kind of, it allowed an opening for addiction to start to creep in.
Yeah, I started to self-medicate with alcohol because I had a lot of feelings of emotions that were rushing in that I didn't like. I couldn't control them. So the alcohol helped me numb those. It's also very dangerous to myself and to the other members of my team and unit that I was involved with, to be impaired while doing that job.
Right.
But yeah, so then when I get home from that tour in 2009, on May 21st of 2009, I was in a training accident where I wrecked a Humvee. And I broke my back in that accident. I rolled it once end over end in 7 barrel rolls, one
Oh
of the
my
soft shell
gosh.
Humvees. Yeah. My helmet, my Kevlar flew out the fucking window, and they were like, "Oh my God, that's his head." So nobody would come and help me
Oh
because
no, because they thought you
when
were decapitated.
thought I was decapitated. So I'm like
Oh,
hanging out, like folded up in this Humvee. The guys finally get up to me and like start to like chain the vehicle to another vehicle so it doesn't flip back over. And like I climb out and I was like, guys, and they freak out. Like everybody was scared. Like here I am with a broke back and trying to stand up. And that was my introduction to opiate painkillers. So that the cognitive opening between the molestation, the the trauma that I sustained with Daniel overseas, then the lowered inhibition and cognitive processing that was taking place due to being stuck in a bed for 3 months on like very strong 30 milligram oxycontins,
oh my gosh.
180 a month. So like, and then on top of that, I got 3 refills. So that's 180 times 3. That's how many oxycontins I was doing a month. Um, like I just turned into like a zombie Nazi. Like I was just angry at everything. And then on top of that, there was all this pressure to put myself in a box when I come home. That like I'm either pro-life, I'm pro-choice, pro-gay marriage, or I'm anti-LGBTQ. Like there was no area for like a gray zone with me, and I felt like every turn, media, our news, our just society as a whole was trying to push this radical agenda on everybody, and I just didn't have an answer. I didn't know if I was pro-life or pro-choice. I didn't know if I was like pro-gay marriage. It was all really new to me. Like I'm a civilian now. Like I'm
Right.
not hyper focused on my military career and my military goal. I have time to think about this shit now, and I just don't know. And no, there's no leadway when you're like, I don't know. Somebody's always right there to be like, well, you should be this way because of this and this and this, and it's like,
Right.
cool, thanks for the information. Um, it just got so overbearing that like I remember I just looked down and I was so defeated. I was just so defeated, not knowing what I stood. I knew what I stood for. Like I stood for liberty and justice and like the old school idea of America, not this new hyper politicized, hyper woke, hyper vigilant So it's like, I need time, y'all. Like, let me figure some shit out. And on top of that, like the pills had manifested into like other drugs, heroin, methamphetamine. Because obviously, after a while, you build a tolerance to pills, and heroin's way cheaper. Um, and meth and just like everything, man. And I looked down and I was like, man, I'm white, and I don't have a place anywhere but with white people because I'm damn sure not a fucking Democrat, and I'm pretty sure I'm not a Republican because I don't know. I'm unaccepted in either group, and like the only people that accepted me were white nationalists and KKK members, and like that was okay. I didn't have to choose anything. I could just be me.
So you were angry, injured, addicted, and displaced. And then how the KKK came in, but how did it enter your life? How did you, become a Klansman? That seems like a big jump, like.
Yeah.
I mean, you're painting a picture that it really wasn't a big jump, that it was a build up. But I think for, I growing up, I definitely heard low key comments around town that were racist. But it was like for those people, their saving grace was, hey, at least I'm not in the KKK. You know what I mean? Like that was the line. That was the bar. The bar was low. But for you, it was enough. There was an opening there and it felt like a fit for some reason. So kind of help us understand how you went from where you're at that moment to you're a bona fide member.
Yeah. So, I mean, like just everything combined, like it doesn't happen like overnight. Like when I tell you that, like I broke my back in May of 2009, like I'm still in the military. I'm still living with this injury. I'm still recovering. I'm still like on the sidelines from my military career. So from 2009 to 2013, when I finally exit training due to med board, like all of this stuff is building. The drug addiction spiraling out of control. I'm not on the active books because I'm on injured list. I'm at home. I'm not taking as many drug tests as everybody else. I'm getting by, skating under the radar because hey, we're putting him out. He's getting med board discharge. We're giving him his honorable discharge next year. Like focus on our active guys that are up for promotion, that are up for schools and this and that. So like there's a very long years time where I'm meddling in this ideology. I'm paying attention more to MSNBC, Fox News, CNN. So I'm building this like aggression towards everybody, right? Because like you think about it, like Fox News, they only push the white supremacist agenda, and MSNBC only pushes the Democratic agenda, and it's like you're trying to like split the difference and watch both of them and see what's going on in your world, and it's like you just see like this attack on Southern America and this attack towards like the Civil War Confederacy statues and things like that. And I really never had like a big interest in it. Like I've always been like a Civil War buff. It's a very influential part of like modern day military tactics and procedures. All of our bases are named after Civil War generals. I mean, it's a very important part of military history and tradition. So I just felt like it was more of an attack on my military history. I don't know why I took it that way, but like I was already feeling like I was targeted and attacked just because I was white and didn't want to say where I stood on certain key issues. And the community, plus I mean, we were really struggling. We were poor. A really influential friend of mine pointed this out years later. Poverty is the catalyst to hate. When you're in a minimum wage dead end job, barely struggling to keep the lights on and gas in your car to get back and forth to work, your wife isn't eligible for food assistance because you make too much to help with groceries. So you're eating ramen noodles. You're feeding your children ramen noodles every night. But you see refugees coming to the country from, wherever it was at the time, whether it was Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, whenever. We've always got a different war that's displaced. The Ukrainians will be the next group of refugees, right? So you're a poor rural American, and it doesn't matter if you're white or black or Hispanic or whatever, but you see all of this attention and focus being given to help refugees and people, immigrants. It pisses you off because it's like, I put my life on the line. I dedicated my life to serve this country, and I'm being thrown to the side because I'm no longer valuable. Like, where's my assistance? Where's the help with my food? Where's the help with my light bill? And it's not because I'm not working. It's not because I'm not attempting. So like, you get that anger. And like my one of my best friends, Dr. Haval Kelly, is a Syrian refugee. I think the Washington Post article, that's me and him. He was like, dude, I've never, like, he came to my house. I first started to like get my life back together. And he was like, I've never been to a refugee camp as bad as your neighborhood. I lived in refugee camps in Germany. I was in refugee camps all across Europe before I got to come to the United States, and never one of them were as bad as the neighborhood you live in. It's awful. The house that you live in is falling apart. Like, what's in your cabinets? There's barely any food in your cabinets, man. Like, this is me doing the best I can do. This is me fucking doing it without help, without assistance. And he's like, even when I came to this country, there were people there to get us where we needed to be and help us with all these things. And so like, his analogy is like, Chris came from zero and everybody praises him for that. And he's like, don't praise me for that. Like, in all actuality, and I even feel bad saying it because like, this is his story to tell, and he can say it because he's a refugee, he's a Syrian immigrant, and he loves this country as much as I do. But he can say this and not catch flack for it. But when I say it, I catch flack that I pay twice as much advance as he has, and I get zero recognition or attention for that. And I think that amongst all of it, the anger, not having a support system, all the effort that I put into this country given away to immigrants and refugees at the time, coupled with my addiction and my anger that I had, it was an outlet. It was a justification for my anger that wasn't real, right? Mm-hmm. So like, now I say that so that I can say this. I see refugees and immigrants come to this country, and I want to see them experience the American dream. I want to see them get the help and the assistance that they need. There's a lot of things out there for people like that. There's a lot of programs. There's a lot of nonprofits and 501s out there that's dedicated strictly to that. I challenge people to create these 501s and these nonprofits that help the rural Americans that are struggling, that are the modern day American refugees. That's where hate springs up. That's where hate's grown. That's where hate cultivates. That's the Petri dish of hate. Rural America.
How did you go from this is your state of mind and now you're in the KKK? What was the recruitment process for you?
So it was different for me than it was a lot of people. There's different tactics of recruitment, right? Like, some people seek it out. Some people stumble upon it. And then some people are targeted for recruitment. So I fell into like two of those categories. Actually, all three, really. So I go home and just like out of shits and giggles, I'm like, organizations to help advance the white race. And how do I protect the white race? And Google never lets you down, man. And the very first response, the very first thing was the Loyal White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And I was like, oh, this should be good, right? So I go to their website and I'm reading like their spiel, right? Because you can't go too far into the website. There's only who we are, what we stand for, contact us. So I'm reading it and I'm like, okay, so they're family oriented, they're Christian based, they're to further the white race, because there's all these organizations out there to help, further immigrants and refugees and the black community, the Hispanic community. But like,
there's really nothing out there for guys like me, right? And like, yeah, I get the Montgomery GI Bill, blah, 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 but I still got to come out of pocket a lot to help out with that, get student loans, financial aid. I mean, like, you know, it was more just like, it was very spiteful, right? Like, I'm going to see what these guys are about. So I put in my contact phone number and an email address. And like a couple of days later, I get a call from a guy. And like, we just really just had a conversation, kind of like me and you are having right now, where like he would talk, I would agree, I would talk, he would agree. And he was like, man, I'd like to get to know you a little more, man. We're having a barbecue next weekend, blah, blah, blah. I think it was starting to get warm out. So, I mean, like barbecues were kind of getting going again. And he was like, I'd like you to just show up for a few hours and, you know, meet some of the guys I know and, you know, just get to know them. So I go, and obviously I leave my family and Melissa and the kids at home. And I go, and at this point, like I had already started to experiment with harder drugs like meth and heroin. And it was showing, you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of, like I'm 190 pounds now. I was 110, if that,
Wow.
with wet clothes, right? So like you could see every bone in my face. Like I was sick. So I get there, and the first thing the guy does, he's like, hey man, you want a beer? And I was like, sure. And about a half hour goes by, and he goes, so you smoke? And I was like, weed? He goes, no. Like pulls out a meth pipe. He was like, do you smoke? And I was like, I fucking do. Right? So like there's another cat like, hell yeah, man, I'm getting free dope here. And like we smoked a lot of dope, and we started to like, we got each other worked up. We got each other pissed off. And like to see the things that I was upset about upset other people and like feel justification in my views was like liberating. It was relieving, you know, and so like I start to spend more time with the guy. His name was Roy Denburton. Like I don't mind doxing his ass. Like he's a piece of shit, right? His name was Roy Denburton, and he lived in Georgia here. I can't remember exactly where. I think it was down towards like.
That's okay. We don't need to give his address.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't care. I just want. He's all over, dude. Like we called him Pickle because he got caught with some compromising photos later on of a cucumber, and you know. But yeah, so I mean. Like,
so basically you were starting to feel like you had a tribe, and so at some point he said, do you wanna? And you said, I do, and now you're a Klansman. Is that how it went?
Yeah, so that's the skinny of it. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much.
And what were some of the other professions of other people in your particular chapter?
So there was a very high, well, not just my particular chapter, but like we interacted with other groups like the NSM, other white supremacist groups like militia groups, 3%ers, Boogaloo Boys, that were dual members. So like there was members in our group that were also members of like 3%er. Georgia Security Force was one of the militias that harbored a large amount of white supremacists. And there was a very high number of veterans and prior servicemen. There was also a lot of, well, I've run across elementary school teachers, police officers, which looking back on it now with the things that have happened over the last 3 years, it's kind of like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but so yeah, I mean, and then mostly just like everyday average Joes, man. But there was the occasional high profile person that was like, hey, nobody can ever know about this. I'm an elementary school teacher, or I work at the fucking the courthouse as a clerk. You know, like I can't be a part of this stuff in public. So when you guys go out and do things, I can't be there. But I'll tell you this: when we did the documentary, The Fight for White Supremacy, I was in that documentary, and I really like it was at the peak of like my involvement. I was starting to get my 4-year-old son, taking him with me to these things.
Oh gosh.
And Yeah, it's bad. Like, I'm a complete fucking douche canoe to your viewers right now. They're hating me. And it's okay, man. Like, it gets better. I promise.
It gets
way
better. And Chris, that's the best segue. So next week, Chris is going to share his story about how his wife staged a successful intervention and more about his process of leaving the KKK and just reformatting his mind. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. I hope to see you next week too. I talk with the most interesting people that you've probably never heard of. Most of them are paradoxical and bring an opportunity for you to grow as a person. So if you like bright, meaningful entertainment, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications.